what is Leosa for active and retired law enforcement officers? Hey guys, my name is Anthony Bandiero, bringing you the Roadside Chat. This one's going to be probably a little longer than normal, but I know that if you're a police officer, this is going to be information that you want to know. Now, before I get into this and give you some context here, I want you to know that I am going to have a webinar on this topic. It's going to be free for any law enforcement officer or retired officer in the country in December. Now, I know this is on YouTube, so by the time you see this, it might be already passed and so forth. But go to bluetogold.com and look for, under our webinars, our course descriptions, you'll see a course on Leosa. Now, what is Leosa? Leosa is the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act. It is otherwise known as HR 218. It was passed by President Bush to kind of consolidate this different patchwork of laws and regulations from state to state, and it basically allows police officers to carry their firearm concealed in other states, even if there's a contrary law, even if there's a law that says that you can't conceal in Chicago or D.C. and so forth, right? That you have to have their permit. So basically, I'm going to kind of give you a quote here. Leosa mandates that all active and retired law enforcement officers be able to carry a concealed firearm anywhere in the United States, subject to certain conditions, overriding most contrary state and local laws. Leosa provides that notwithstanding any other provisional law of any state or any political subdivision thereof, a qualified law enforcement officer or qualified retired law enforcement officer may carry a concealed firearm that has been shipped or transported in interstate or foreign commerce, so long as the individual also carries the requisite identification. Okay, so this is a concealed carry law, okay, and it's very, very powerful. Let me just kind of give you some high notes. When it comes to active law enforcement, the rules are pretty easy for you. You just got to be active law enforcement. You got to be a sworn officer, and you have to have the lawful authority to make an arrest. Does that mean you actually make arrests? No, you could be a chief somewhere that hasn't made an arrest in 20 years, and obviously you qualify. Sometimes you'll have prosecutors who have statutory arrest powers. Corrections officers that have statutory arrest powers. Most of them do, right? Prison guards and so forth. So you got to have that statutory authority to make arrests. And we're not talking about citizens' arrests here, right? You got to have statutory authority to make arrests on behalf of the state. You have to be in good standing, right? And so forth. Now, when it comes to, all you need is this ID card, right? So you can take your gun to, if you are a cop in Texas and you're going to go visit family in Chicago, you have your ID with you. Don't necessarily need the badge, even though it's probably a good idea. You have your ID card with you. You go to Chicago, you carry concealed, and we go from there. Now, there's a few restrictions that you got to know. Number one is this does not give you lawful authority to carry concealed in government buildings, right? So going to the post office. I don't know if you know this, but carrying a gun concealed in a post office, in a parking lot or inside the building is a felony. So, this doesn't allow you to do that. It doesn't eviscerate that law. It does not allow you to carry in city buildings and so forth. It does not allow you to carry in federal post offices, okay, federal buildings, right? Also, it doesn't allow you to carry contrary to a private person saying that you're trespassing with the firearm. So if you walk into a building and it says no firearms, then this permit does not give you the authority to actually ignore that sign. Now, between you and me, I ignore all those signs. I go in there, I mind my own business. I carry concealed. If somehow I print, or somehow I'm going for the box of Cheerios and the muzzle of the gun shows and somebody comes up to me and says, hey, we don't allow concealed carry here, then I leave, right? But I'm not going to carry in a business just because they have that stupid sign, right? That's just me. That's the lifestyle that I live, because I live dangerously. All right. So back to the story at hand. So cops can carry, obviously in any other area that's not just listed, the government buildings and the private places that say they don't want firearms on their premises. So that means that basically cops can carry anywhere else concealed. Man, that's pretty big. That's huge, right? So if you have a law in a state that says no concealed carry in a park, well, that's not a government building and that's not private. So, it's the off-duty cop can still carry notwithstanding those laws. That's how powerful this is. Let's also talk about a few other issues. Number one, when it comes to retirees. Retirees have to comply with a few extra things. Number one, they have to have at least 10 or more years of service. Number two, they have to qualify yearly, right, in a firearms training program. The active duty guys they have to comply with state law, right? So if the state has requirements, I'm sure all do, just qualify with that. But actually, strictly speaking, Leosa doesn't even really talk about it. So in my view, if an officer is an active duty officer and has missed their qual day and is technically out of compliance with their state firearms qual, they can still carry under Leosa, in my view. Okay. So, but not the retiree. The retiree has to have qualled within the last 365 days, right? That qual is different by state. Some states are very easy. Like I think Nevada is a very easy qual. Some states are a little harder. I qualified in Washington State. It's like a 25-round course, nothing crazy. And then we talk about, all right, fine. Now you have the qual. Active duties, they just do whatever they want. The retirees have to qual every year. Just a little side note, a lot of police departments will qual these retirees for free. I know that, my local department does. Okay. Now let's talk about what can you carry. You can carry a firearm that was manufactured or transported in interstate commerce. Most guns are, the gun that you have in your possession was transported in interstate commerce. I guess we would have, maybe a debate that if you have a cop in Georgia and they have a Glock that was made in Georgia, right? That gun was not introduced into interstate commerce because it stayed inside Georgia. But if you buy a Glock that was made in Austria, then obviously that was in interstate commerce because it includes foreign commerce. I've never seen a case law that even dived into this issue about whether or not, the officer was carrying a gun that was made in the same state they were from. But I guess if you want my advice, if you do have a gun that was made in your same state and you're going to travel outside the state with it, it might help you to get another gun that was clearly made in another state and then it got transported to your state. But maybe I'm being silly there. All right. So there's the gun. Let's talk about magazines, okay, that go into the gun. Leosa, at this point in time, does not cover the magazines because the magazine is not a firearm, right? It's a part of a firearm, just like sights and lights and grips are part of firearms, but those individual parts in and of themselves are not defined firearms. So Leosa does not cover magazines, which brings me up to the next point. If you have a state if you're going to a state and they have a magazine restriction, let's say you have a Glock 17 that can hold 17 rounds, and you bring that Glock into that state and they only allow 10 rounds, I got bad news for you. I think you're breaking the law. Do I think that law is ultimately constitutional? Absolutely not. I think that the Second Amendment covers the magazines, right? If you're lawfully carrying the firearm, then I see no constitutional authority to limit the number of bullets in that firearm. But these are two different issues, right? Leosa is not going to give you the power to bypass that law because it only talks about the firearm. My advice to you is this, because you are a law enforcement officer, active, retired, you don't want to get jammed up by some overzealous cop in New York City or Chicago that maybe doesn't believe in the Second Amendment or something and so forth. So I personally have, when I carry my gun in other states, I have low cap mags for this reason. I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but I do it because I'm not looking for problems when it comes to breaking laws for magazines and so forth. Okay. All right. So also the same argument may go for the bullets, right? Even though there is an argument that Leosa covers the actual bullets in the gun, you can actually have hollow points, and even if they're restricted in the state. But we'll talk about that in the webinar. Also, you cannot be under the influence of alcohol or an intoxicating substance. Does this mean that you can't even have the sip of alcohol with the gun? Well, look, if you want my personal advice, you should not be commingling alcohol with a firearm when you're out and about, right? Being at your house might be a totally different story, you know, messing with your guns and having a beer. But when you're in a bar or something like that, it's just not good practice, right? However, what do I think this means? I do believe that under the influence is a term of art, and it means that your mental faculties are impaired, meaning technically if you have one sip of beer, do I believe that you're violating Leosa? I don't, even though you should not be consuming alcohol and carrying concealed in public. The last thing I want to tell you, okay, is that the ID card. Retired cops need identification from their agency, showing that they are a retired law enforcement officer. This has been a huge debate in the last several years when it comes to Leosa, because there are some agencies out there, mainly like corrections, that just don't give their retirees a ID card. This ID card does not have to say concealed weapons permit. It just has to be like, hey, John Doe retired from our agency, right? And some agencies do not give that retiree that ID card. And here's the bad news. Without that ID card, you cannot carry concealed under Leosa. It's BS, and I hate it. And when I see cases like this, it absolutely breaks my heart that an officer, police officer, corrections, whatever, prison, guard, that they do their, they do their career and they want to carry concealed federally, and their agency will not issue them a ID card. And here's also the bad news. There is no mechanism under Leosa to force that agency to give you an ID card. I don't like it. I hope that if you are working for those agencies, you can put some political pressure on them to change their opinion or their position, but that's the way it is. Okay, so in a nutshell, if you are active law enforcement or you are a retired law enforcement and you comply with those rules, you are allowed to conceal carry a handgun, right? A firearm. I shouldn't even really be that restrictive. I don't think you're going to conceal carry an AR-15, but it does say firearm except a silencer or machine gun in any state and the District of Columbia, as long as you are not bringing it to a government building when you're not allowed to. And if you're told to leave by a private company or business, you should be out of there, right? But there it is, pretty powerful. So hopefully I gave you a little crash course in Leosa, and you're going to attend my webinar. We'll go in depth about all these things. There's actually more things. We'll talk about the quals and these ID cards and so forth. We'll talk more about it. Hopefully I'll see you at that webinar. And until next time, my friends, I hope I helped you get it right every single time. Thank you.